so let's go ahead and we're recording today's event, of course, so we're going to have the video for this available out on our website sometime within the next 24 to 48 hours. You can come back and review that later if you wish. Okay, so let's dive in. So here we are. We're looking at our main payroll's home screen. We find the reports in question, and the first ones we're going to talk about are pay period earnings reports, essentially. So we click under reports, and right near about a third of the way down the list, we see the option there called pay period earnings, okay? So when we click on the pay period earnings report, it then opens up a window asking us which employees do we want it for. If you don't make any selections here, it includes all of your employees, okay? You can choose to run it for, select employees based on a pay type or period or pay frequency or department if you wish. For the purpose of our webinar, we're not going to limit that. We're going to go to next. And then it pops up and asks us to enter, say, a date range for the report information that we're wanting. So let's say we're going to run this for the month of January, okay? So January 1 through January 31st, technically you can run it for any date range you wish. However, if you don't have any pays or pay dates entered, payroll posted and recorded within, of course, the from and to date range, there's going to be nothing that's going to report on the report. So you can run it for one pay date if you wish, but you have to make sure that the actual pay date is included in the from and to date range. Then we're going to go ahead and click next. Now it offers up the two different pay period earnings reports that are available. You have your taxable earnings report and your pay type earnings report. And each of them report on something just a little bit different, okay? So as they really kind of indicate, the name itself does really kind of tell you what it includes. So the taxable earnings report, reports on the actual taxable earnings for the employees within the period, and the pay type earnings actually reports on the type of employer pay type that were paid during the respective period. So again, for the purposes of our webinar, we're going to leave both of them as checked, and we're going to click, but you can run them for one or the other, but you have to choose one or the other, of course. Then we're going to go ahead and click next. So the first report that it then opens up is our pay period earnings report. Let me zoom in a little bit here, see if I can't get a little more clarity here, maybe expand that. So it shows our employee names down the left-hand side, what they were actually paid for. So, regular units, overtime, additional, sick, and vacation time, and total units. So if you have salaried employees, of course, you're not going to see anything if you have nothing entered under hours worked for any of your salaried employees. But it's going to show what they were paid for in terms of, was it regular pay, overtime, additional, sick, or vacation with the total. So in this case, Larry, our senior pastor, is clearly a salaried employee. There are no hours or units. All the other employees could be salaried. In this case, we've chosen to enter 1 hour under our other salaried employees here, but then it shows the total units for hourly employees or salaried, and then it shows the actual total regular earnings. And what I mean by that is anything that's recorded as, it's the taxable earnings report, folks. So it's the regular earnings without allowances. So that would be regular overtime, additional, vacation, or sick, okay? Allowances certainly could be considered taxable or classified as taxable, okay? But in this case, taxable earnings is taxable regular earnings, essentially. Then it does show our Medicare wages, Social Security wages, Medicare wages, federal wages or earnings, state earnings, and local if applicable. So literally as described, regular earnings, allowances, Social Security, Medicare, federal, state, and local wages, okay? So this is all, the other report is also listed here on the same page. Up in the upper left, let me get out my highlighter here. So in the upper left, notice it says 1 of 2. So there is no, if I scroll down, I'm not going to get to the second report, okay? So if I want to get to the second report, I have to click the little down arrow, and then I click the down arrow. Now it moves into my pay type earnings detail report, okay? So again, it shows regular units, overtime units, additional, vacation or sick time units equates to hours essentially, or days or whatever it's classified for the employee. what their regular earnings were their additional overtime earnings, additional earnings, vacation or sick time earnings, any allowance earnings, and then total earnings. So again, it just tells us here's what their earnings were reported or recorded for during the respective pay date or pay period. Okay. The other history report that we're going to show you momentarily is going to show similar iterations of the earnings themselves. What it's not going to show us is things like what they were paid for, regular wages, overtime, additional vacation or sick time. But what it is going to show us is what they had earned for federal or reported for federal or state or local wages, how much was withheld and what have you. Okay. So that's our pay type earnings report. Okay. Or pay period earnings reports, excuse me. There are a couple of those. Okay. Very helpful in some cases. If I'm not mistaken, let me go back. There's one other thing I want to check here real quick is I believe this report, is it this report? No, it's not. It doesn't allow us to run it. I think it's the pay period earnings report next that we're looking at next that does allow us to actually run the report that runs across different periods. Okay. So let's close out of this. We've run this here, so it only allows us to run it for the respective payroll year that we're working in, okay? So now, when we cancel out of that, we're going to go back to reports, and we're now going to choose the one right below that called pay period deductions report, okay? So when we now choose our pay period deductions report, okay, again, it allows us to choose who our employees are, and then we can limit that, but typically we won't. We're going to want to run it for all of our employees. Again, it's going to require that we enter a date range for what we're wanting, and this report is the one that is best suited for when you're trying to verify, say, your 941 taxes, and we're going to see what that is going to look like momentarily. So maybe if your deposit schedule was semi-weekly, you would run this from the 1st through the 15th of the month, and then from the 16th to the final date. Or if your deposit schedule is monthly, you'll run it for a month. So in this case, we're going to run it. Many churches are on a monthly deposit schedule, so we're going to run it for the month of January, whole month, 1st through the 31st. But again, you would run it for whatever month you were wanting to see the deductions or the pay period deductions for. So then we click Next, and it opens up the actual preview of the report itself. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here again, maximize our screen just to kind of get a better feel for what the report looks like. Hopefully it should be easier for folks to read. So it shows us, again, each of the employees' names that were paid in the period, the gross pay, deducted Social Security and Medicare, any federal income tax that was withheld, state and local taxes, gross pay less taxes, any deductions and the description of those deductions, and then the deduction amount, and on the far right, the actual net pay for the period. So in this case, this would be the entire net pay, not a per pay breakdown, but the total net pay for, in this case, the month of January, with, of course, summaries in the total column, or total at the bottom, okay? Again, a very, very helpful and useful report. So again, it shows total gross pay, total Social Security deducted, Medicare withheld, federal tax, state and local. One of the things that I like to point out about this report is it does show below the total, and on our line, it shows our 941 deposit for the period. It shows the actual amount of Social Security and Medicare that's owed, so it not only shows the amount that was withheld from the employees, but adds in the employer's contribution to that, the federal income tax withheld, and this figure, these three totals right here should, when calculated together, should equal the 941 deposit on the far left, okay? And if it doesn't, you need to let us know, but I've never heard of that happening. It does show also local taxes that were withheld, if applicable, as well. And then, of course, our state taxes are local. So if you're a state that has state taxes, income tax that's being withheld, that's paid, you would, again, run the pay period deductions report for the period that your taxes deposits are required. Many states require them quarterly. So in that case, you would run it from January 1 through, say, through March 31st, or whatever quarter you're running it for. And then the total right here at the bottom of the state column would be the amount of state taxes that you would need to pay, or local. And if you need a breakdown of what needs to be paid to each one of the local taxing authorities, you would look down here in the lower left. Okay. Pay period deductions report is really the best report to run when you're wanting to know what was deducted or withheld from employees' pays, whether it's tax withholdings or deductions. We actually do have an employee deductions report as well, but this report puts everything that was deducted or withheld from employees' pay onto one single report. Okay. If I'm running my 941, wanting to determine what my 941 tax deposit is for my deposit schedule, this is the report I'm going to run. I could run the 941 too, but this is going to show me everything. And I'm going to print this if I need it too. Okay. It's only a one-page report, typically, unless you've got multiple employees. So with just about 5 minutes left, we're going to jump into our history report here. And how we find that is we go to reports, and then right down here near the bottom, above the voided pay report and below employee local taxes, is the one called history report. So when we hit enter on that or click on that, it opens up our different history report options. So notice it says history report type. And I'm sorry, folks, I can't zoom in on this, but I've got 3 buttons here, radio buttons. I got the payroll history report, got the employee detail hours report, and the federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. They all offer different information. Okay. Some more similar than others. So in this case, the history report and the federal taxable earnings withholdings, federal taxable earnings report at the bottom kind of shows similar type information, just in a little bit of a different format. The history report shows the period pays in a summary format for the month and the quarter. So what I mean by that is if I go to next, again, leaving all of my employees, again, running my date range, this report defaults to the full year. So if I choose group history report, it's going to put totals for all of my employees together. If I choose individual history report, it's going to be each employee is going to be on a separate page. So again, it depends on what you want to see and who you want to see it for. So if we choose group history report, leave it as the full year and go to next, it's going to show us here. Let me zoom in a little bit here again, maximize the report. So here it shows employees all at the top. So it shows January, February month, quarter 1, April, May, June, quarter 2, etc. with the total. Okay. So again, gross pay, Social Security, Medicare, taxes, federal tax. These are just the amounts. These are the employees' totals only. Okay. Net tax, deductions, allowances, net pay, etc. Okay. 941 amount over on the far right. See that? And notice here when we go down into the third quarter, it's showing nothing because we don't have anything in our training data past June. Okay, in our trial data here. But again, if I run it for individual employees, so if I go back and I change it to an individual history report, it's going to show me, Senior Pastor Larry on page 1 with what his breakdown is by month and quarter. And I go to next page and it shows my, my custodian Jimmy with his breakdown by quarter and by month and by quarter, et cetera. Okay. It all depends on what you want to see. Okay. So when we go back, and we're going to go back again, and we're going to choose the employee detail hours report. We go to next. Again, I can choose a specific employee, but if I don't, it's going to run it for everybody. Again, it defaults to the full year. I have the group and individual report options. So if I leave it as individual, this would be the one that might be most helpful. It shows, again, each employee on a separate page. So again, Larry doesn't have any hours entered. He's a salaried person, so we've not applied any vacation or sick time to him, so this report doesn't really provide us with much information for him. But if I go to my next employee, here we see on the left-hand side for Jimmy, I see his pay dates that he was paid. I show the number of hours he was paid for, and if there was any additional overtime, vacation earned, sick time earned, vacation used, or vacation or sick used, okay? And then it would show me a summary of the vacation and sick time used, or unused, excuse me. And I would just simply go down the report and look at the same thing for other employees, okay? So this report, typically I work with folks a lot on this, and I'll use this report a lot if they want to see how much vacation time an employee has earned or sick time has earned, or how much vacation or sick time they've used. And then how much is unused of either vacation or sick. Okay? Again, a useful report in its own right. Finally, with just a couple minutes left, this is the report, the federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. I'll say I use a fair amount when I'm on my support calls working with my users that are having trouble, say, with their 941, okay, or with W-2s or something. So again, much like the other history reports, I have date range control. Again, it defaults to the full year. I can run a group history report or individual. If I choose the group history report, it will put all of my employees' pay dates on the same report. So what I mean by that is, when I zoom in a little bit here, we notice I've got January 15th listed multiple times, or January 25th. Well, that's because I've got a listing for each one of my employees and their pay amount. What I don't see is their name. Okay, it's a group history report. Okay, totals it for the period. So if I've got a question about, something for that I'm questioning my earnings or something for my 941, maybe I'll run this for my first quarter of 2020. And again, when I go to the report itself and I kind of scroll down a little bit here, if I go down to the very bottom, I got a couple pages here. Let me go to page 2. Right here, it shows all of my totals of my earnings without allowances, federal taxable compensation, which I think would be line 2 on the 941. That total should match up with that. Okay, so, again, if we want to see really what's showing up as taxable versus non-taxable, whether it's for allowances or deductions, notice I've got a column here called taxable allowances over versus over to the right, the one called non-taxable allowances. This report's going to allow me to isolate that. Okay, so finally, if I go back here and I choose individual history report or a taxable earnings report, it's going to bring up each employee for the period. And again, it's going to show me 9 different reports, specific, say, in how it relates to their, say, W-2, for example. This report's going to allow the employee to see the breakdown and see if something changed. Okay? Sorry, folks, we're 20 minutes on the hour here, or 20 minutes on our topic here. But again, utilize some of these reports. These payroll reports are very, very, very helpful, and they'll offer some insight for you, okay? But you got to dive in and play with them, all right? So that is our topic for the day. Thank you. Call us if